Chapter 4, In Spite of Disease. Do you remember the question in the minds of the three women that first Easter morning when they hurried to the tomb? Who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? The stone was the bottleneck that seemed unbreakable. There was a sense of urgency about their trip, for there was a job to be done. The body of Jesus must be anointed with sweet-smelling oils and spices, despite the obstacles in the way, the huge stone, the Roman seal, and the Roman guard. Such barriers would have kept most people home. But in spite of all the impediments to action, these three women started out, "Who shall roll us away the stone? Who shall remove this impossible barrier? Who shall clear the way that we may get into the tomb and do our work?" But wonder of wonders, the obstacle was removed before they arrived at the tomb. The impossible had happened. Of course, there are difficulties in your way, too, in breaking through the bottleneck of disease of any kind, but like these three, you must choose between acceptance of the bottleneck and exercise of faith. If you believe that the stumbling blocks are too much for you and sit down in despair, the bottleneck will remain. But the interesting thing about the law is that if you only make a start, it reacts instantly and creatively to your faith. The promise is, before ye call, I will answer. Just walking toward your difficulty, and God will clear the road beyond your wildest expectation. The dynamis, or potentiality of God within you, will become the dynamite of your word. If you will face your difficulty instead of going around it, you will find that your stumbling block will become a stepping stone. Like Jacob's ladder, your obstacle will become steps into heaven. It would be interesting at this juncture to learn just what it is that is troubling you. What is the bottleneck, obstruction, or impasse that you have failed to remove? But it is not important, for it makes no difference what the obstruction is. The law can and will dissolve it. The law does not say, "Behold, I heal a toothache, but not cancer." The law does not know big or little, curable or incurable, malignant or benign. Perhaps you still believe in the necessity of sickness and suffering, or you may still entertain doubt or uncertainty as to the effectiveness of your prayer. Perhaps it is your unconscious conviction that it is at fault. How then can the healing principle operate? Can you see that doubt or uncertainty in giving a treatment becomes a part of that treatment? The law is exact, immutable, and inexorable. If you still believe that some problems are hard and others easy, you cancel completely the operation of divine power. What you need at such a time is absolute confidence in yourself and in your word. If your intention is for healing, you must expect to be made whole in spite of all adverse and contradictory appearances. It is not your body, however, that awaits healing. It is your belief. Prepare yourself for the acceptance of healing by saying many times a day, "There is nothing in my consciousness that can obstruct the operation of my word. This bottleneck has no place in me. I refuse to recognize it or give it power. I know that my word is powerful enough to penetrate and dispel every inharmonious condition. I know that my word instantly reverses and dissolves any and all adverse thoughts and beliefs. I am filled with faith, with power, with the expectancy of fulfillment, with the absolute conviction that spirit is always victorious. The Christ mind within me entertains and expresses only that which is positive, life-giving, and perfect." The first thing every sick person should do is to examine his mind as the possible source of his trouble. If the instruments of science had failed to heal the disease, it is almost certain that the seat of the trouble is in the mind or consciousness. Disease is what the word implies, a lack of ease. It is a state of mind that acts adversely on one's physical and emotional selves. It is an absence of harmony and balance, and this lack opens the body to destructive and foreign elements. His state of mind is the premise from which one's thoughts and action springs. You act as you think. Your state of mind is your consciousness. You express in it all that you say and do. To change any condition in your life, you must first change your consciousness. Well, how do I go about this, you ask? The first thing to do is to analyze your mind, attitudes, beliefs, feelings, mental reflexes, biases, thoughts, and viewpoints. For the outward overt you is determined by what you are like inside. If there is disease or sickness in your body, there must first be disease and sickness in the soul. For every effect there is a cause, and that cause is always within. Mind, soul, and body are one. What affects one affects the other. If you accept this, you will see what it is that the sick man must remove in faulty and negative thought patterns and habits that limit the expression of his soul before he regains health. If the materialist insists that there is no healing except through medicine, you must remind him of the faith that medicine generates. Without faith in the doctor and his medicine, the prescription would do very little good. The doctor's assuring, encouraging, and uplifting words are factors in many instances more effective and potent than the medicine itself. Jesus said, "According to your faith, be it unto you." If your faith is sufficiently strong, you need no outside help. It alone will heal you. It makes no difference what form of healing you choose. The underlying factor is faith. If there is anything in your subconscious mind that doubts, divides, or questions the capacity of the healing power within you, or if your faith is partial or half-hearted, the healing principle will not operate. The Lord your God is a jealous God. He is jealous in the sense that he demands your whole mind, strength, heart, and soul to be spiritually healed of any condition or disease. You must believe wholeheartedly that there is no limit to the God power to heal, other than the limit of your ability to conceive that power as healing. The principle is never limited. Your soul can bring out a condition as perfect as your mind can conceive. The doctor refers to this healing principle as vis medicatrix natura. The metaphysician refers to it as God. To know God as all power and all health is essential in spiritual healing. You must recognize and feel the reality of the all-power. You must believe in it and live it. Now, to get back to the bottleneck of the mind, ask yourself these searching questions. 1. What is my attitude toward my environment, toward people, my family, my friends, and my associates? 2. Are my reactions positive or negative, true or false, normal or abnormal, wholesome or unwholesome? Am I unkind? Am I parsimonious? Am I moody and easily discouraged? Am I miserly? Am I avaricious? Do I away to irritation, criticism, and petulance? 3. Does life with all its ups and downs seem good or bad? Does it inspire me or depress me? Do I think of myself as a cog in the wheel or as the whole wheel? 4. Do I think of myself as being the mercy of others, a victim of circumstance? Do people get in my way and prevent me from accomplishing my purpose? 5. Have I allowed disappointments and frustrations to harden my heart? Have I interpreted the life force by fear, worry, anxiety, anger, hate, or jealousy? 6. Am I starving the cells of my body through apathy? Am I dying because of indifference? What has happened to my zeal? How can I hope to stay alive without it? Just as apathy is a major cause of death, lack of enthusiasm is a major cause of disease. The cynic is on his way out. He is living from the bottom of his life instead of from the top. Failure, frustration, futility stem from cynicism, and cynicism starts with a loss of faith in oneself. The word cynicism comes from the same root as the word canine, meaning curish or dog-like. A cynic is a man with a dog consciousness, and he lives in a dog's world, someone has said. Contrast the cynic with the enthusiast. The cynic is pessimistic, distrustful, and gloomy. The enthusiast is optimistic, ardent, and zestful. The word enthusiast comes from two Greek words, in theos, meaning in God. The enthusiastic man is a zestful man, alive in every part of his being. The cynic sees life only in the present. The enthusiast sees it as a whole. You begin to realize what unpleasant dispositions, abnormal attitudes, and intemperate thoughts do to the flesh. A bad disposition is just as much a disease as chickenpox. We talk much today about preventive medicine, but most disease is preventable through discipline and moderation of the mind and emotions. Disease is an outward and physical sign of an inward and psychic deterioration. Reread the preceding sentence and underscore it. If you think of the body as was molded by the action and impulse of the mind and soul, you will see why it is that your sins always find you out. The body is a barometer of the soul. Whatever happens to the soul happens to the body. If the soul is withered by cramped and wizened thoughts and attitudes, the body will manifest shrinkage. The body is so inextricably woven together with the soul that every breath, nerve, organ, bone, sinew, drop of blood, and saliva bear witness to the impulse and reactions of the mind. A negative condition in the soul has a depressing effect upon the whole body. Do you rail against pain? Then change your consciousness. Pain is one of your best friends. If it were not for pain, you would not know that you were ill. You would not have time to gather your spiritual forces together to meet the intruder or to call the doctor. Are you suffering from an acute disease? Then look to your physical habits, intemperance, indiscretion, tension, and excesses. Perhaps your resistance is low. You may have neglected your body and are running on the rims. The body requires care, exercise, rest, wholesome food, and fresh air. The man who neglects his body and the laws of physical health is likely to die suddenly, while the man who takes care of his body tends to die by imperceptible degrees. A natural deterioration which starts at birth should be the only occasion for death. It is all up to the individual. You cannot buy health, but you can prevent disease. But how about hereditary tendencies, you ask? That is a good question. Heredity, physical traits, and characteristics remain as tendencies only until mental indiscretions such as fear and worry set them in motion. Jesus expressed the principle of psychosomatic medicine in the words, "Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." Psychosomatic refers to the soul-body relationship, psyche meaning soul and soma meaning body. Both the cause and the cure of disease are within man. When we understand this, we shall see that spiritual healing is a change from within. The cure is a threefold process. 1. Reversing destructive and discordant thoughts. 2. Rebuilding the conscious mind upon a new foundation. 3. Restoring the natural circulation of thought. Psychosomatic medicine transposes destructive mental and emotional conflicts into affirmations that remold our bodies according to the divine pattern. When the inner cases of disease have been destroyed, and the subjective mind no longer denies our good, health begins to return. Are you suffering from a chronic disease? Then look to your temperament. Like attracts like, even in contagious disease. To break down the body tissue, disease must be nourished by disease thoughts. It cannot operate any other way. To grow in the body, disease must find fertile soil. Chronic disease does not come suddenly like acute disease. It must be built up through years of abnormal and indiscriminate thinking. That is why chronic disease usually attacks middle-aged people instead of the youth. The chronic disease is an accumulation of perverse thinking that gradually weakens the structure of the body. Chronic disease can be prevented by a perfect relationship between the body and the soul. If disease is due to a lack of life or to the diversion of its currents to a destructive thought pattern or belief, health will return when the bottleneck is removed. It is true that flesh is subject to many ills, but disease cannot manifest while man is dwelling in a calm, peaceful, and temperate state of mind. Acceptance of all that is implied in the words, "underneath are the everlasting arms," is the very foundation stone of the man who manifests his sense of security by his emotional control. Contentment is an important factor in health. Discontented people are restless, irascible, unhappy people. They are filled with covetous, dissatisfaction, despair, and friction. Wanting they cannot have, they disturb the natural rhythm of the body and lay it open to disease. Men in retirement have more chronic diseases than those who are daily occupied, for the retired man has too much time to think about himself and his ailments. An untilled field runs to weeds. The energy once used in the active work is now wasted. Having no outlet, it results in pent-up congestion. That is why the inactive person is harder to deal with than the active one. The sick person who lives in idleness seldom recovers. Out of pessimism comes negation, privation, and indisposition, and rheumatism. Out of grief comes waste, loss, and shrinkage. Out of melancholy comes tuberculosis. Out of monotony and unhappiness come high blood pressure, low blood pressure, circulatory disease. Out of parental confusion, contention, sex difficulties come childhood diseases, whooping cough, mumps, and chickenpox. If love and harmony were at work in the home and minds of parents, childhood disease would be greatly lessened. Out of selfishness comes congestion and colds. Out of anger comes functional disturbance. Out of brooding comes heart trouble. Out of unhappiness come palsy and apoplexy. Out of grievances and resentment comes impaired vision. Out of pride comes acid in the blood. Out of despair comes kidney trouble. Out of moroseness comes liver trouble. Out of crabbiness comes indigestion. Out of egotism comes trouble in the spleen. Out of tension comes fatigue. Out of resignation comes hopelessness and failure. Countless other reflexes are possible. Do you find any of these abnormalities within yourself? Keep looking, and you may find others not mentioned here. You cannot share in the race consciousness and not find some. When you have found your specific physical irritation, reverse it, and the ailment will disappear. Plato said, all the mischief of the body proceed from the soul. That is why there can be no permanent healing of a body without a corresponding healing of the soul. Until the inward source of motivation has been dissolved, the disease will continue to appear. Like a prairie fire, it will break out first in one place and then in another. Why is it that some people heal more quickly than others, one asks? Because of their optimism and their will to live. If there is no will to live, a person can die just as quickly from mumps as from nephritis. Optimism, on the other hand, accelerates healing, eases pain, and cleanses the blood. Do you accept the dictum of 70 years and 10? Then it becomes a law for you. The scientist said that you should live in your present body for at least 500 years. You die before that time only because you live and think outside the law of God. Senility is nothing but an accumulation of irrational thoughts, apathy, indifference, inertia, and morbidity. Man eliminates himself by allowing his enthusiasm to grow dim. Old age is the penalty for losing faith in life. To live and think temperately will postpone senility for many years. But what about germs? Someone is sure to ask. That is another good question. Germs are always present in the body, but they are only a secondary factor in disease. Something else must first come. If germs were a primary cause of disease, everyone would suffer in an epidemic. Why, then, are some people immune to germs and not others? Why do they attack at one time and not another? We shall answer both these questions in one sentence. The quality of individual consciousness and the state of health determine the effect of harmful germs. Before germs can take hold, the cell resistance must be low. Immunity isn't in the body, but in the mind. When the mind is God-centered, germs have no place in which to breed. There is no spot in which they can take hold. When every part of the body is in right relation to every part, the body will express perfect health. The old saw, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, is still true. Unseating the mental cause of disease is just as important for the well person as for the sick person. The well person wants to keep his health, and the sick person wants to recover it. The well person analyzes the inner self to prevent disease, while the sick person analyzes the self to cure it. Health and sickness cannot occupy the mind and the body at the same time. Ease is irreconcilable with disease. Some teachers would have us believe that all illness stems from mental reflux, but this is not the case. There is, of course, no way of telling just how many diseases are of mental origin, but the following statement gives an indication. One doctor says that 60% of his patients are sick because they do not know how to discipline and organize their emotions. A famous clinic is authority for the statement that only 25% of its cases can be handled by the instruments of science, the remaining 75% being the result of sickness of the mind and the soul. End of chapter.